And in the United States, I think we most often deal with conflict as a society through violence, a lot of violence. That's not always 100% true, but as a majority. So, Abraham, do you want to go?
Yeah, I am Abraham Karikam from Kerala, South India. In our community, we deal conflict with mediation and intervention.
Right. Thank you. Matt?
Hi.
Okay. Hi, Biswadev. Great.
I was looking at the circle and I was just going after Abraham. So.
Oh, good. That's a good way to do it.
Yes.
As taught in the school, always been obedient. Go circle and circle.
Let's do
So
it.
Vishwadev, I come from West Bengal, eastern part of India. In all my recent conflict, which I have not been able to find how I did it, but mostly in the past when we faced conflict in the family, in the community, I tried to bring music and various other forms of art and culture, finding a common reason, common platform where people can engage themselves and without any bias. So that's where the conflict mostly happens. So I find it very useful, and I try to practice always to bring music and various other forms of art to really address conflict.
Despina? Despina, you're on mute.
Okay, so I'm called Despina. I come from Kampala, Uganda. And the way how we deal with the conflict, at least in my family, we organize a delicious meal where everybody is supposed to eat, and those who are in conflict, they have to share a piece of that meal. Like it is I don't know how to term it, because it's like a pounded kind of yam. And then the people who are conflicting are supposed to share this in the middle and eat as the beginning of accepting the other person.
Amazing. That's wonderful. Wow. Emmanuel, is he on?
Sorry, I just came back. I was not following the discussion. My network cut off. I just signed in again.
Okay. Well, let's go to Inouye, and then we'll come back to Emmanuel when he's on.
Okay, I am Inouye Texier. I come from Caracas, Venezuela. And I'm trying to find, because we have a lot of conflicts. So, but sometimes with the university, even in my family conflict, I try to breathe, to go to my inner space, try not to judge people in the situation, to have my center. And sometimes I stay with people, maybe talking, but sometimes I just move my body to another place if I feel that I cannot resolve the conflict in that moment.
Wonderful. Karima?
I think that there could be lots of answers, but I'd say mostly that we try to keep cool and understand and respect, even if there is differences. Of course, trying to find a compromise or even mutually satisfactory solution. And I think also I'm aware that sometimes it needs time, allow for time. Not everything can be resolved immediately.
Right. Wonderful. Matt.
So I grew up in a former coal mining part of South Wales, and people there deal with conflict in a couple of different complex ways. One of them is, people are very kind of straight talking and plain talking. So if someone's got something that they need to kind of clear the air with you about, usually they'll sort of start their statement with, "I'm not going to lie," and then say something very difficult to hear, or not being funny, and they'll say something that's quite difficult to hear. And I don't know if that sort of prevents things from building up. But then, of course, there's a lot of toxic masculinity in those sort of working class communities as well. So a lot of men who keep it inside and then express conflict, deal with conflict through violence too, historically, certainly. So that's a couple of things.
Okay. Who's next? Can't say Monica. Hi, Monica. Welcome.
Thank you. A conflict in my house was done in different ways, and in mostly, Matt, I can agree with you. You say exactly what's on your mind, and then you forgive about it immediately. And sometimes you don't even remember what you said because it's out and gone, and it's just kind of gone that way.
Mm-hmm.
And other people, I realize, don't do it that way, and you can say some things that you don't even remember saying, but yeah, it's to put it out there first and then kind of just walk away from it, and it's just over.
Mamoon?
Yes, my name is Mamoon. I'm from Jordan. From where I come from, we use mediation, and it depends on the seriousness of the conflict. Let's say if it's in a house between, for example, a man and a wife, and his wife, they bring their fathers and mothers and sometimes cousins, and they start, to involve in solving the problem, because we are extended families. So we refer to the wise people, the most senior in the family. And in the community is the same. When a conflict happens, we need to engage let's say community leaders, like religious leaders, senators, ministries, prime ministry, whoever you can bring to the conflict meeting. You can bring. It depends about the seriousness. If it's very serious, sometimes people bring the king. If it's between two big tribes, the king himself, the mediator. So it depends on the problem. So it's always, we listen to the wise people and the leaders of the community and compromise.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. So Subi is not here yet. Alice?
Hi, I'm Alice in San Francisco. So looking forward to the fact that 1 month today is the first full day of our leadership gathering together here. And in my family, we dealt with conflict by pretending it didn't exist, or really maybe even believing that it didn't exist.
Yes. Okay, wonderful.
Linda, did you want to go back to Emmanuel?
Oh, yes, Emmanuel, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm here now. I come from a very small town here in Nigeria. I think, like Mamoon said, it also depends on the nature of the conflict and where. If it is in the home, we have a different way of dealing with it. But generally in the society, first we seem to pretend a lot. And sometimes we deny that the problem does not even exist. We argue, we spend a lot of time arguing about it, fighting over it until it gets out of hand. Then we begin to react, and then not knowing exactly what to do.
Monica. Oh, you're on mute, honey.
Okay. Now it's okay?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I was talking about more conflicts in the household. I come from the United States, but I come from an Irish Catholic family. And I really think a lot of it came from, you go to confession, it's over, it's done. You know, you just say a little prayer and let go. And I just wasn't thinking about the bigger community problems or really serious kind of conflicts when I made my comment rather glibly.
That's fine. We give people the choice. Okay, that's wonderful. All right, so I want to just talk about conflict. I think many of us in this group believe that conflict can be healthy and normal, and actually, if dealt with, can be very productive. But as we know, we're part of many groups. Subi, hi, welcome.
Sorry.
How are you?
I'm good. I am so sorry. I got stuck in a terrible thunderstorm and then I was shifting my houses. So I'm sorry I'm late.
It's okay. We just went through and talked about how we deal with conflict either as a go-around, either in our family or in our community. Would you like to answer that?
I didn't get you, say that again.
How you dealt with conflict in your family or in your community, either one.
So I try objectively presenting the facts first. And then getting people to at least talk about the situation.
Great.
So that's the first step that I do.
Okay, thank you so much. So we're approaching this as conflict can be a very healthy thing, but when it's in a group, and we've often seen that either in groups or in our communities, it can tear groups apart. And so practicing healthy conflict is critical to building powerful and healthy groups. As we know, we can't say there will not be conflict. There's always conflict at some level, can be big, can be little, but how we deal with it is what's important. And though many of us may have learned how to deal with conflict in healthy ways in our own lives, we're often having to facilitate groups who may not, where there's people who may not be in that place of cooperation or having learned how to deal with conflict. And so we're often having to think through how we're going to manage that. And so that's some of the things we're going to talk about today. In order to do that, we're going to explore the 4 most basic responses to conflict based on a lot of studies and a lot of people who've done this work. And I know there's more than 4 basic responses, but these are the 4 key ones. And you may not feel these are no longer true for you, but I think all of us are often fighting our tendency of doing, having a negative response to conflict. And by looking at that and kind of exploring those 4 areas, we'll be able to better work with groups. So we won't leave today having resolved or worked through every conflict you might face in your groups, but hopefully you'll leave with some tools to tackle them and navigate conflict moving forward. And just in the introduction, I already know that you all have a lot of strategies that we'll be able to share with each other, so that's really great. But let's start with our opening. And at our last training on this training for the other groups met, Karen read a beautiful reading from a book called The Moral Imagination, which I went out and bought immediately after hearing this reading. And it's by John Paul Lederach. John Paul Lederach. And I've already, you can see I've marked lots of places in the book already that I just think are full of wisdom. The subtitle is The Art and Soul of Building Peace. So this is him talking. I recall an experience in the Philippines at the end of a seminar on conflict transformation with grassroots leaders from the indigenous areas of northern Luzon. As part of our seminar, we held a midweek evening celebration. Several of the tribal members offered to do their native dances, titled The Mosquito and the Frog. We were mesmerized by their capacity to imitate the animals. It was as if in the dance they had become the insect and the amphibian. So accurate and detailed were their body movements and postures. In subsequent days, instead of talking about conflict analysis in the ways that it would typically be presented, we asked a different question. What does it take to be as observant about conflicts as it took to be observant about the mosquito and frog, to the degree that the dancer could capture the whole picture? The answers boiled down to a simple idea. You have to be patient and watch a long time. Stillness proposes that we pay attention to what is around us, at our feet. The greatest missed potentials of change are not those far-off things we missed because we could not envision them, but those things we missed because our movement bypassed and made them invisible. A Chinese proverb says, "It is not the size of the mountain that obstructs our way. It is the pebble in our shoe." When we focus on the really big things, we often miss the greatest potential of resource, insight, and change that is present right in the location where our feet are planted. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to ask that you do a little reflection, and you can close your eyes if you want to, but and you can make notes if you want to, and do a little journaling. How do you usually respond to conflicts in a group? How do you usually respond to conflicts in a group? I'm sure all of you are in a group that has conflict. So what does it make you feel like? What does it feel like in your body?
Linda, personally, I usually become so emotional because I'm always empathetic, and then I get usually torn between the two groups that are conflicting. I try as hard as much as possible to try and see different viewpoints of those conflicting. So I add a lot of emotions to the entire conflict.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I generally go silent, and the silence in itself speaks much more. So it ends up drawing a lot of attention of people, and probably that just helps to get the whole fervor and run of emotions and temper of everything a little cool down, and then that's a way that I use to get people on the table to at least talk about what the issue is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So let's do a little more reflection. So we've heard from a couple people how feelings come up, emotion and silence. Think about what yours is, and we're going to come back to talking about this in a minute. Think about what yours is. What impact does that have, whether it's silent or emotion? What impact does that have on your group? Let's think about that. What impact would that emotion have on your group? And then we're gonna do an exercise that talks about the way conflict manifests. And how we all respond differently. And often, and think about this, how does the responses that we have of conflict in groups maybe relate to experience of conflict in your own life growing up? Is there something that connects that? And often we've developed responses to conflict to, hi Maria. Hi, welcome.
Hi, hello, thank you.
We've developed these responses to conflict because it was very useful to us as we were growing up, and it really helped us kind of survive and gave us what we needed. But now, as we're activists and working for peace, we may need to develop some new ones. But let's talk about the 4 common ones. There are 4 common underlying ways that we often respond to conflict. One is blaming others. And if that escalates, it can be even attacking others, like verbally attacking, or even more, saying it's your fault. And we see this, you know, in hate crimes in this country, actually killing people because they're Black or Muslim or, you know, or gay, or transgendered. We had 4 transgendered women just killed in the last week here in the United States. The second one is blaming myself. We always go to, this group of people will go, oh, something's wrong in the group, it must be my fault. I must have done something wrong. And another really common one, and we heard Subi talk about this, is to withdraw, to go silent, to just shut down or be fearful sometimes. And then there's others who just don't engage. We're just pretend the conflict doesn't exist. And that's a very common one too. Now think about, and you may not currently do this, but what is the one that you most commonly did or do of these 4? And what I want you to do is put those 4, put your name in the chat and the number of the one you think is most common for you. The one that you would probably fall toward the first. So, for example, I tend to withdraw. When conflict first comes up, before I've thought through it or anything, I just want to shut down and be invisible. If it's in my partner and they're blaming me, I may want to blame back. Usually I don't blame someone else, but I always say, it's not my fault. And that's a form of blaming someone else. So just write in the chat your name and the number that you think most connects with how you would respond to conflict in a moment.
Linda, Alice has her hand raised.
Yes.
Linda, as I think about this, I realize that if I'm in a conflict with 1 or 2 other people, then I have a different response than if I'm in a conflict of a group that's 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 people. And I think it's because, well, yeah, I think it's because I feel more involved directly. If it's just you and me and I'm in conflict with you, then I feel more involved than if I'm in conflict, for example, with this entire group. You know, so I'm not sure which one you want me to think about.
Well,
Linda, I was also thinking same way, because I'm a bit confused with because I have like 2 emotions in my way of dealing with conflict here. So I don't know whether I look for the one which has more or fewer people or more people or.
Well, let's think of it as much as possible. If you don't, if you have both 2 different responses, go with the group one, because we're mostly talking about groups that we're working in and that kind of thing, more than just in your family. I mean, it could be either, and it'd be nice to learn from each one, but so Yes.
No, I have also questions because a little bit confused as Espina, because I have also a lot of emotion, but I think it depends on the nature of the conflict.
Yes. So just choose maybe a group you're a part of and think about what your most often reaction would be in a group. You know, you don't have to stay stuck in these because we're just going to do some small groups and talk about these different responses. So don't worry if it's not exactly the right one.
Yeah, like Alice, it depends what group, and I'm sort of certainly, especially because we're in business of conflict transformation, right? If engaging with conflict is part of our job, I'm able to engage in a different way than I would with my own family, for example. And the way that I engage in work, and I mean work in the broader sense here, I don't feel is represented by any of these necessarily. So if it's all right, I think it's probably easier to think about how I engage with family or individuals outside of that world of work.
Okay, so once again, the choices are one, I tend to blame others or think it's their fault when something first happens. And maybe, you know, after I've thought about it, after I've done all the wonderful strategies y'all introduced, maybe I change that. But my first reaction is to blame others. Or it could be my first reaction is to blame myself. And avoidance is a big one. I just tend to avoid. That's number 4. And number 3, I got out of order, sorry, is I just shut down. I withdraw. So, yes.
Linda, we need to hear from Biswadeb and
Yes.
Abraham.
Okay. Biswadeb, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of a bit confused because as depends, you know, like it's just when the purpose is bringing a conflict resolution, many times I find that the justice has to prevail. So in terms of finding that, when I negotiate with groups, I find it better to take something on me when I was not to be blamed. But it helps me sometimes, you know, like I went and I'm sorry I didn't attend and I'm sorry this. And by saying that, people really ease on, you know. And so the different strategies and different, but, you know, so I'm a bit confused, but rather, you know, it's just, I think justice, so there is a fault and there justice need to be prevailed. So you're right. The first thing goes is the blame, either 1 or 2.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Linda, it was helpful to me to have you say just to choose what I think is my first response, and then we're going to explore it. So I'm not. Yeah.
We're
not
just
defining ourselves forever now.
And we'll come back around to some solutions that have been mentioned. Abraham, which one would you put yourself in? Yeah, which one would you put yourself
usually in a group, when there is a conflict, I also have most
I think you're breaking up, unfortunately.
To understand, so it's easy for me in my mind. So it's not to develop conflict, but to resolve conflict. That will be my primary motive.
Yes. But in your first reaction, are there any of these that you might fall into?
Yeah, usually we become a little bit angry when, for example, in interfaith dialogue and people come against us vehemently. Our first reaction will be to blame others, you know.
Okay.
But then,
yes,
yeah.
and then we move on. And
Yeah, right.
I'm sorry, I missed Biswadeb. What were you?
It was to blame others.
Blame others. Okay, so I believe Biswadeb and Abraham could go into a small group.
Yes, I have them, Linda. Thank you.
Okay, and there's one bigger group we might want to split up, right? Is there a bigger?
There's 5 in the withdrawal group.
Yeah, let's make that into 2 groups.
All right.
And what we're going to do is we're going to go into small groups in a minute, and you're going to discuss these kind of reactions. And there'll be, did people get to have their printout? If not, we can probably put the questions up, or if one person has them, you can kind of help lead the group. And when you come back out of the small group, we're going to ask that you, one person just share some observations of what they learned about this, and this way we'll share. You know, it doesn't even have to be something that's most common for you, but we've certainly seen people do these things in small groups, and we need to learn, you know, from this conversation how we can, what that looks like. So you're going to share what this response looks like for you in your small group, maybe where it comes from. You know, did you grow up in a family that does this thing? And then each group is going to talk about how you see this problem for what it is, and not only see others, or not see yourself. If it's first, how do you not only see others as the only source of problem? If it's blame, self, how do you see the problem for what it is and not see yourself? For the withdrawers, you're going to talk about what would you help you stay in the room and stay present. And for those who avoid, how could you recognize the conflict for what it is? So we're going to go in these small groups. Hopefully you have these prompts with you. Maybe we can put those into the small groups. I don't know if we can do that. Tony, can we?
Not in the way you're thinking, Linda.
Okay. All right. So go in your small groups, talk about what this response is, and how it could be different. Okay?
How much time?
15 minutes.
Several people mentioned a couple, so I put you into a group of one of the areas that you mentioned.
Yeah. So, all right. Do you want to say who's in what group, just so as you put them in, Tony?
Well, they're already going in, Linda.
Okay, good.
Despina, are you able to join your group?
That's so confusing about how to get them into the group. See, it's so cold out. Some observations that each group maybe thought about of what it would take. So group 1, blaming others. How did you see, what was some of your observations?
And that group had Monica, Biswadep, and Abraham in it?
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Biswadeb, do you want to say something?
So what was hugely interesting that, like Monica shared, how many others have in the US, you know, things like, as we example in India too, in a whole nation, there is a leadership that are really motivating people toward more polarization, stuff like that. Like in the US, what's happening? So there is a blame. There is a leadership that provoking these separations, divisions, and bringing more conflict. So this is something in a broader issues, in a bigger issues, in the national issues. These are the people absolutely that causing that. So the people are to be blamed. This is what our realization. But Abrahamji also said that when we go and listen to them, that maybe after discussions we see why their standpoint, their viewpoint is conflict that can be transformed. So listening, and that was a more of a conflict resolution. So that was a really good reflection that it can be conflict can be transformed. That's a great opportunity. Right. So listening to that, why their standpoint, and then answering to their questions that may help them to really go beyond, and then somehow a synergy happen that people take resolutions for the conflict, to be taking conflict resolution.
Thank you. Thank you, Biswadip. Group 2, blaming self.
That was Emmanuel and Subi.
Yeah. So we had a lot of interesting discussions because we took a couple of case studies from Emmanuel's region, and we essentially spoke about when as a leader you're faced with conflict from our CCs and in our personal life, how do we kind of then address the whole issue. And some of the insights that we came up with, that communication is the key. Intention is something that primarily matters. And so Emmanuel sees himself as a part of the problem, because of which he also feels very responsible for it to solve it at the same point in time. And likewise, it also goes for me that I see it myself as a part of the issue, and I see opportunities in conflicts, so I address it from that space. And I think these were a couple of things that we came up with.
Great.
Linda, could you synopsize that for me, please? I hear everything.
Yeah, maybe someone else can help. Subi, how would you put that in ways we could write it up here on the sheet?
So intention and communication is the key.
Mm-hmm. Intention and communication.
I'm sorry, Linda?
Intention and communication is key. Right.
And we see ourselves as a part of the problem, because of which we feel more responsible to address it.
Feel more responsible. And how does that help, you think, to feel more responsible? Is there a way that can be turned around?
So we start seeing opportunities in conflict because we are a part of it. So we, being a leader, we are able to, address the situation better.
As a leader.
As a leader.
Okay.
Yeah, I think to also add to what Subi said, blaming myself as a leader in a way, takes away the sense of guilt from who you lead. And it helps a lot in resolving conflict. Even if as a leader you are not responsible for the problem, but in trying to offer solutions, for people see you blaming yourself for the wrong they have done, first of all, it takes away that sense of guilt, and then it creates the space for you to be able to look at the problem objectively.
Okay.
So when you take away the sense of guilt that you feel, then you have more space to think creatively about the conflict. Is that right, Emmanuel? Did I hear you right?
That's what I said. Thank you.
Right. All right. I think I typed up that last one. Yes. So getting out of the guilt place helps us be much more creative. All right. So the third group, withdrawers. What would help you stay in the room and be more present? And do we have two groups of withdrawers? Yeah. The first group may be Sue, Tony.
Yes, the people that were in the two withdrawal groups were Maria, Alice, Crema, Espina, and Inoue.
Okay. Who wants to speak to that?
I can say something. So we were Alice, Despina, and Karima. And we felt we had a lot in common. We were thinking what would help us stay in the room when we tend to withdraw. And that's okay. First of all, be aware that there is tension. Then relax. And how to relax, breathe, feel the body. Listening does help. Because it takes away the attention from self and helps one to understand and then be also with others and then play a creative role. Yeah, I had one thing that is, if I feel that somebody is attacking or talking unfairly or aggressively, I am not sure of how to react, because there is an urge to hit back or to somehow do something, but I don't like the ping pong. I don't like that ping pong. So sometimes I say nothing, and that could also help. But on the other hand, sometimes you need to prevent in the unfair attacks.
Especially as leaders and facilitators, if we are, and I'm one of these, if we tend to withdraw in conflict, it means we can't facilitate it. So how do we begin? I like all your things for how do we begin to be aware and relax and really just go into the conflict with a group we're maybe helping and facilitating. And so that's really great suggestions. Thank you. Number 4, the avoider.
I'm sorry, Linda.
There's another group. In a way, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Okay, I was with Maria. It was a very, very good and helpful conversation in Spanish. That we use a lot of words, a lot of thoughts. And we found that when you work with yourself, how to act in a conflict is what happened with her and with me. Because the first reaction, as many years in family, was to withdraw, not to give more fire to the conflict. But as I told before, for example, now at home, when I have problems with my family, what helps me to stay here in the room is love. Okay? And because of love, I apply the tools that I have been working, in this case, with Elaine de Beauport-Antole, that I breathe, I go to my inner space. I try to find the difference between my being, my stillness. I stay there, not to judge my daughter, my husband, anyone, okay? Not to react, but with the justice of the situation. And that makes me more wisdom to move for looking for the solution, not to stay in the conflict. It helps. And we also talk about the situation in the work that is different. For me, in my special case, it's different because I don't stay in the room because of love. I stay in the room because of the goal that I have, because of the objective, that work for the goal. I put my body with the person in conflict, but not focusing in the emotion, trying not to, because when I'm the injustice, what I'm trying to work with myself is not to react, to clarify. That's not really. But the breathing, breathing and stay, a lot of emotions. Breathe in, but not withdraw, but be very specific. Clarifying, say something, appreciation at the beginning. Okay, that's a good idea. And one is not like this. Two, not like this. And staying, but be very specific with the answer and the response. So that is very good to have tools to, is what we conclude. And Maria, you can add if you want. But it's very important to work and to have a strategy and to have tools to deal with the conflict. Because it's not, we are going with emotion and with the judgment, and we are not going to arrive to any solution, I guess.
Yeah, just to expand a little bit on the tool. So what we were saying, that training has changed the way that we respond, and that, and of course this is wonderful that we are here, that we have to exercise to remain in the room and to have the most suitable response. And this is a training. You have to train and to be to stop withdrawing and be really present and trying to solve the situation. So I think that we are more able to do that after training and experience.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Okay, now we'll go to the avoiders. How do you begin to see the conflict and not avoid?
And that was Matt and Mamoon.
Yes, Matt, you would like to start, or shall I?
Why don't you go ahead?
Yes. Okay. We have something in common, that we try to avoid conflict because we are always concerned about the expansion of the conflict, because conflict brings conflict, and sometimes conflict brings 10 conflicts. Since we are dealing with the humans, and to handle a conflict related to human expectation is very time consuming and need a lot of energy and a lot of patience. So for me, I try to see if the conflict does not affect the end result. I'll try to avoid it as much as I can. And sometimes we as we deal with the human, again, we do not know everything about the conflict, the whole information, because we are dealing with symptoms of the core problem. We don't know the roots, and sometimes we don't have time to dig and understand the whole background of the conflict. So we try to avoid it. But for me, I believe this is not healthy. We need to address every conflict, especially as we are transformational leaders. We're trying to make change, to transform things, to change realities. But the only obstacle for me is the time and the resources. Thank you.
Great. Did you want to add anything, Matt?
Yeah, I suppose it's worth noting that I think whatever your response to conflict is, and like I was saying, it really depends in what context it is and who the conflict is with. And also I think whether I'm in conflict with someone or I'm in the position of like a leader or facilitator, and there's a group where conflict is emerging, I think I'm very different depending on whether it feels personal or not. And I think that's very important to notice. Also, my power in relation to the conflict. Do I have responsibility over people that either I'm in conflict with or are in conflict with each other, where I have the power to set consequences for bad behaviors, for example?
Right.
Am I avoiding conflict with someone who has power over me, and therefore potentially making it harder for other people to resolve conflicts with that person too, because they're not being challenged or something like that? And I think there's obviously align somewhere between conflict avoidance and conflict prevention. I like to think that I do a lot of conflict prevention, and I think finding out where that line is and knowing what tools for identifying where meaningful conflict prevention crosses over into kind of sticking your fingers in your ears would be very useful to kind of overcome some of that avoidance behavior, because I do think some of it might be, if you're in a position to and have the power to do more heavy lifting than someone else because they don't have the internal resources to contribute as much to conflict prevention, is it enabling behavior and avoiding conflict or not? That's an interesting question, I hold.
Right. So yeah, that is a really interesting question. I mean, I think all of us have seen that tiny conflicts can come up that we really don't need to take the time and resources to address. It may be something we could put on the parking lot and come back to either as a one-on-one with that person, if it's one person causing conflict. There's also, where we actually try to actively deal with conflict. I know I was working to build a national network and with groups who really didn't want to sit in the same room with each other, or certain groups didn't want to sit with the other. And it broke down a lot through race lines. So, and this has also been true with religious lines as well, where people just don't like each other. And I remember what I did, because I thought, oh, well, just invite all these people to come to a national gathering, and then we'll all be in the room together, and this is going to be great. We'll make a plan of how we're going to build this national network. In fact, when I started talking to people, inviting people, they're like, well, I'll come if that group's not there. Or we're not going to participate because, all these privileged groups that have lots of money just walk all over us, take our ideas and run with it and get lots of money because they have lots of privilege. Or, we're a person of color group and we're not going to work with those white folks, that this one particular group that has very racist policies. And I was like, wow, we're all on the same side. We're all working for justice, and they don't want to sit in the room together. So I called every person back. It took a lot of time and resources. But to build a national network, I thought, this is what I have to do. So I called everyone back and I said, okay, what would it take to build, what would you need to be able to come in this room and work with people? And I was surprised by some of the answers. Some people said, well, I'm not going to share any of my ideas or any of our work. And other people said, we have to not get into personal conversations, all kinds of stuff that people said. And so I wrote back and I in the same conversation, I said, but what is your vision if everyone could work together? What would that look like? And so people had beautiful answers, and I sent out a letter to everyone and I said, okay, here's what it would look like if we could all work together and build this powerful national network. But here's what's standing in the way. And I just laid it out honestly, what people were saying. And I said, I'm going to call you back and see what kind of agreements we need to make to be able to stay in the same room together and talk about this. So we set up those agreements. That's where living agreements came from, like we did in our first exercise. We asked people, what do you need? What do you need from the group? What do you need from each other? And I sent that out ahead of time saying, okay, we're not going to talk about people's work, and we're not going to discuss a national network. People said, I'm not ready to discuss a national network. We're not going to do this yet. Let's just get in the room and try to talk. So I asked people to bring an item that shared something about themselves and why they did the work. And they came together, and the first exercise that afternoon was, let's share. our stories. And people shared their stories, and they were all very beautiful, very powerful. And some brought religious things and prayer rugs and different things. And some brought newspaper articles that impacted them when they were a kid. So very powerful stories. And then we did visioning. And we did this in the first workshop too. We did visioning of what is it that we could build if we were all working together and had this, we're much stronger than the sum of our parts. And people had this beautiful vision together. And by the end of that day, and the one other thing, because food was mentioned as a powerful tool. And we could have had everything catered exactly ready to go, but instead we had the caterer bring food where people actually had to work together to prepare the food and had to be together fixing our meals, and we left lots of time. And by the end of that visioning session, the second day, we had people presenting hypothetical issues that we wanted to discuss. And people started saying, well, if we want to share our ideas, can we? Even though we made an agreement not to. And so we gave people that option. Every single people shared. Every single person shared. And they might make jokes like, now I don't want to see this in someone else's proposal, you know, without giving us credit. And at the end of that, one woman who had been most resistant to coming and had been probably the most hurt by some of the more bigger privileged organizations, she said, you know, I feel like we've accomplished more here in this last 24 hours than the last 17 years I've been in these kind of groups. And I think we should build a national network. Again, something we'd said we wouldn't even talk about. There was total consensus. And we had a half day left the next day. We put together, after everybody had spent all that time building relationships, cooking together, hanging out together, sharing stories, the next day we put together the most powerful strategic plan on how we were going to build this national network. And that network went on for the next 18 years. Very powerful work is done, maybe 16 years. Very powerful work they did, and now they formed into several other kinds of organizations and networks. And I tell that story because I think it's so important that we understand that sometimes taking the time, now we planned the time, but sometimes taking the time and the resources to do that kind of deep work around conflict moved us to a place of building one of the most powerful networks in the country. And had we not taken that time, it would never have happened. And a lot of the people in that group still say that. So I call it going slow to go fast, because if I'd tried to do a strategic plan on building a national network, we could have spent a year doing that plan and still not got anywhere because of the way people were not in agreement. So that's why I came to believe so strongly in visioning, because I've done that so many times around conflict, around different countries that were at war with each other. I've done that with another international religious church that was very large and was about to split apart. So how to deal with that kind of conflict is really critical. So I want to just ask you maybe what you observed from hearing everybody and from hearing the different strategies that people talked about. Yes, Abraham.
From all the responses, we can make out one thing, that is conflict is not bad always.
Right.
Conflict can be transformed in such a way that we harness a better relationship with the other parties than before. So this is true in the case of families, in communities, in the nation, but if we are able to address this issue well, then always we can come out to a better situation than before.
Totally. Monica?
One of the things that, as someone who, you would know where I stand on most anything, I really want to know what I need to do better in bringing out the withdrawal and those who avoid. Because I just want to say, there are a lot of times that if somebody doesn't realize that there is a problem, you just can't deal with it. And I'd like to share something from my family. At one point, my husband and I were talking, she did this, she did this. My daughter came kind of coming in crying. Why are you talking about me like this? And we both looked at each other and said, we're talking about the dog. And if she hadn't asked the question,
mm-hmm.
she would have had this perception that this is what her parents think of her.
Mm-hmm.
And we would never have gotten to a place of saying, this is not what we were talking about. And so sometimes I just want to say to withdrawals and avoiders, if you don't find a way to ask a question or participate, you may never know how much you could change what's going on by just asking, did I hear this? Am I seeing this correctly? Because those of us who are talking about it don't know that you're hearing that or don't know that you're seeing that. So I just wanted to share that.
That's fabulous. And Shasta says, be careful what you say about dogs. So, yes, that's so great. That is so great. And how do we, sometimes we don't even know that conflict exists. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Mamoon? You're on mute, Mamoon. There you
I believe that the conflict itself, it's like mosaic, diverse, and you cannot apply one strategy. You need to know all strategies and try to use the best one to achieve your all the group or the organization objectives.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you need to open your heart and listen, and sometimes you need to avoid if it's gonna be add more to the problem. But most of time in our work as a URI, we need to listen as much as we can. As Monica said, I agree with her that sometimes we do not give us the chance to listen to the others.
Right.
So we need to be creative and apply all kind of strategies to reach our goals. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Subi?
So I have a question from your story, basically. Who, if I may ask, who was the one supporting you with the resources to build the national network? Or was it you? And I'm asking you this question is primarily because even in the intention, for example, if I'm doing a visioning exercise in my regional assembly and somebody is supporting me with resources and they might have intentions which differ from me, it might create an obstacle in bringing the entire, say, group together. So even if my intention to build a network or to build more cohesion within the group is good, but the person backing me with resources has, maybe different agendas of their own, and certain people who are backing us up with resources might not have good relations with the participants. So
Sure.
then how does one go about that?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Spirit in Action raises our money primarily from individuals. And there are some wealthy individuals, and I had gone and asked foreign money to build national network, particularly, and usually I found people like I've built an education national network. This was a progressive communicators national network. And we've done things like that, but I raise money from individuals, and I don't, they might be interested in the issue, but I'm always framing it as grassroots folks need to decide how this is going to look and how it's going to work. So that's how I do it. I find it's harder to do that sometimes with foundations. So
right, because it also creates obstacles to bring participants, because they feel that it's being supported by like XYZ person or foundations, and they probably won't like get along. So that's another challenge in itself.
Yeah, thank you. One last comment, Anaway, question or a comment?
Yes. I also agree that there are different kind of conflicts, okay? And also different kind of roles that we play in the different conflicts. And I find that there are conflicts that you can manage or mediate because you have the immediate goal to create harmony, to work together for a plan and for a special activity. But that the goal is to look for harmony, to do similarities, to look for the same goal, and it's okay. But in my experience, a lot of years working, for example, in URI, with different faiths and different ethnicities, sometimes there are wants and there are feelings that are hidden in people. I put an example. We have indigenous people that have been conquered and dominated by clergymen, Christian clergymen. Mm-hmm. So I found that in some of them, there are hidden feelings that, okay, we put together and the harmony, do the plan, but when you do in very little things, it comes out. So they are there like a deep work to do with emotions and with healing this feeling, ancient ones of domination. And also I found clergymen that have authority, personality, that they feel like missionaries. And so I found that kind of difficulties that they stay in them because maybe it's needed more time in a deep work that have in a safer space, that work the emotion in disclosure each person. So it's different. The goals in these two cases, for example. And it's like a dream I have since a lot of years before. I wanted to, that we can have someday another kind of meeting of these two ethnicities with people that have this feeling and could do a deep work for healing.
Yes, yes. We'll come talk some more about that when we come back from a break, but it is, you know, I think the thing that we're mostly doing with URI, with Spirit in Action, my organization, is we're working with people who've had deep hurts, and often it is hidden when they come together, but they all want something, or they want peace, they want justice. So how do you help them see that as a commonality and grow from there? So we'll talk some more about that. I just want to share some of the conflict strategies. These are ones that were named already that I've heard y'all say. This is from our opening and a few other things. I wonder if anybody has any other thing, but compromise, being respect and respectful, listening, super important, intervention, we won't have time to get into that today, but it is such an important one. And it's another way that I've done work around conflict. Mediators, and they're not always just formal mediators, but they can be very wise people in our villages or communities, or can be elders in our family. Meditation, straight talk, love that. We'll talk a little bit more about how to get people to do straight talk. Sharing food, this is so important. I love that someone threw that in. I have a great example about that I won't give now, but maybe I'll write it. I'll send it to you in writing about the role that food can play. Someone said keeping cool, and how do we keep a group to keep their cool? We can do that through music. There's a lot of work being done now around conflict using music. I've always thought of it as singing together, but you can actually play very relaxing music that will actually make people's blood pressures go down. Praying together, let's add that. Praying together also helps a lot, Emmanuel says. Taking time away to clear head and then come back. Often in the middle of conflict, I'll ask people to go take a walk and then come back, go be in nature. Not taking sides in conflict is a needed strategy. That's for us. I mean, other people are taking times. Keep musical instruments and altar near your workplace. That's a great idea. Breathing, just asking people to stop and lead them in taking some breaths, because not everybody knows how to do breathing, but getting them to do deep breathing is really important. I love to keep musical instruments when I am doing trainings that I know that's longer than a day. I like to bring my drums and musical instruments. I have a giant basket of things people can use even if they're not used to playing musical instruments. And all these are amazing ones. Mirroring in pairs, that's a great one. Soderot talks a lot about that. If you ever want to know how to, he knows a lot about conflict resolution. If you ever have a problem, give him a call. He's done a lot of studying around this. And people may have more you can add. Use fishbone cause effect technique to discover the root cause of conflict. Mamoon, I would love for you to send me a link to something to tell me more about that. I don't know that one, so I'd love to learn about that. Now, we're going to take a break. If you can make it 5 minutes, back in 5 minutes, that'd be great, but I allotted 10. We're just running a little behind, but 5 minutes behind. But come back in 10 minutes on time, because I want to start exactly on time. So that would be at 15 after. If you could come back at 15 after.
Linda, I have a question.
Yes.
Is this
Other people can go if they want to. Go ahead.
Is this ending at 12:30?
It ends at 1.
Okay, I need to get off the phone at the break then. I'm very sorry because I will be out the door by 12:30. So,
okay.
My best to everyone. See you in June.
Okay, great, Monica. And we have this recorded. You can watch it.
Thank you.
The last half. I'd love for you to see the last half.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay.
Be
All
well,
right, we're on break. Everybody, bye-bye. Okay. A couple more people maybe coming in. Moon.
So many elephants.
What's that?
I have so many elephants because I get it wherever I go, and then people, I have so many gifts. So, like, you know, I went to Kerala. I remember that somebody handed me over an elephant as a gift.
Nice, nice.
And it's supposed to be very auspicious when somebody gives you elephant.
Yes, yes. This is my little elephant.
Yeah.
Nice.
The little one.
All right. So we're going to talk about elephants. And so the definition of an elephant in the room, so to speak, let's go to this. It's an obvious major problem or uncomfortable situation that people avoid discussing and acknowledging. And so the example this cartoon gives, or this thing gives, is our company's financial trouble is an elephant in the room, but the company president will not talk about it, and we never discuss it in meetings. So that's a common thing that happens in some organizations. So put a cartoon in. Alice asked for a cartoon, and we found this great cartoon. Sometimes even if I stand in the middle of the room, no one acknowledges me, the elephant says. So, but I'm going to read a poem, and I sent this out to y'all ahead of time, but I don't know if you got a chance to read it. But just listen, and we'll talk about it afterwards. This is an old poem. I forget how old, but hundreds of years old. There was 6 men of Hindustan, to learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy the mind. The first approached the elephant, and happening to fall against his broad and sturdy side, at once began to bawl. Bless me, it seems the elephant is very like a wall. The second, feeling of his tusk, cried, Ho, what have we here? So very round and smooth and sharp, to me 'tis mighty clear. This wonder of an elephant is very like a spear. The third approached the animal, and happening to take the squirming trunk within his hands, then boldly up and spake. I see, quoth he, the elephant is very like a snake. The fourth reached out an eager hand, and felt about the knee. What most this wondrous beast is like, it's mighty plain, quoth he. 'Tis clear enough the elephant is very like a tree. The fifth, who chanced to touch the ear, said, even the blindest man can tell that this resembles most. Deny the fact who can, this marvel of an elephant is very like a fan. The sixth no sooner had begun about the beast to grope, than seizing on the swinging tail that fell within his scope. I see, quoth he, the elephant is very like a rope. And so these men of Hindustan disputed loud and long, each in his own opinion exceeding stiff and strong, though each was partly in the right, and all were in the wrong. So oft in theologic wars, the disputants, I ween, rail on in utter ignorance of what each other mean, and prayed about an elephant not one of them has seen. So what does this poem show about conflict? What is this poem
no one has the full picture.
What's that?
No one has the full picture of it.
No one has the full picture. That's right. And does that often happen in conflict? That someone doesn't have the full picture?
They have different views, different perspectives, different point of view of the conflict.
Different points of views and perspectives, yes. Anything else?
Yeah, the real issue will be beyond the understanding of ordinary people, you know. The real picture is beyond the reach, often.
Beyond
The reality may be away from our grasp.
Seems the elephant entered the room.
The elephant in the room? Yes.
Yeah, it's making some noise, that elephant.
Yeah.
You
It's
should
breathing. It's
see
trying to deal with
Monica
conflict.
I don't know if I could get it on here or not, but Monica sent us a noisy elephant.
Linda, what was Abraham's point?
Abraham, I'm sorry.
The real issue may be beyond the reach of our understanding.
So the real issue may be beyond the reach of the individuals.
I need to add something here. I think
individual understanding, yeah.
Okay.
Individual understanding.
Thank you.
Mamoon, did you have something?
yes. I think we tend to deal with symptoms and forget about the real problem.
Linda, could you repeat that?
We tend to deal with or tackle the symptoms of the problem, not the real problem.
So we tend to deal with the symptoms of the problem. Yeah.
We tend to do that.
Yeah, we tend to, not we can.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah. So in some of these stories, the king came out because they were yelling so much, these men, and he said, y'all are all being stupid, looking at only one small point of view. And if you were to all figure out that this was the whole thing, you could have used this elephant to take you on your long journey home. So, so it's, I think one of the role of us as facilitators is how to help people see the whole. How do we help people, as Abraham mentioned, reach beyond the individual understanding and see the whole? And we do that in a lot of ways, through storytelling, through sharing information. And one of the ways I do that is I actually use elephants. To sort of, elephants in the room is a common thing that people say in groups that I deal with a lot. And so I've put together, I have about 27, 28 elephants. And I pack them up in a suitcase when I know I'm going to be with the group. Here are my elephants, a picture of them on the table. There's tiny little ones, there's big ones, there's puppets, there's elephant noses. Shasta in the back is modeling my elephant ears. And so I have all these different elephants, and I've taken them into groups, like I said, a board and trustees and president and staff of a national church that was having problems. I've taken them into a really formal group in DC, the Securities Exchange Commission, working with a bunch of lawyers. And I've used them in many settings. And so what happens is I ask, if there's a lot of conflict, I ask people to pick out an elephant. I just throw them in the middle of the floor. And it's so interesting. I mean, I've had a president pick up a puppet and talk through the puppet. You know, some people feel better if they have a puppet in their hand and can sort of disconnect from the way they're speaking. And we go around and have everyone say what the issue is about. And usually this is with a major issue that's happening. Like this was a breakdown between boards and national staff and members, and enough that they really thought they were going to split apart. And so it was a major thing. And so you might think elephants are silly in such a major crisis, but in fact it allowed people to speak really from their hearts and honestly say what was happening. I've used it in another network building situation. And there's something about the elephants that allow people to talk more, and just, you know, there's some bigger elephants people actually hug for security. And it began to get some of the unspoken conflicts. Now, I'm not talking about everybody has a different conflict. I'm talking about here's a major elephant in the room that people need to talk about. And so sometimes it's like the poem where people have different points of view, certainly the staff versus the board versus the members, active members, saw different sides of the elephant or different parts of the elephant. And so just by telling their stories and what they saw, begin to open up a place for conversation. And then created a safe space for people to talk about. Now, very hard things get said during that time. I've seen people go into blaming, and you have to just, you know, maybe pause people and get them to breathe or play a piece of music. But this is really important for us to learn how to do. Not necessarily just elephants, but whatever methods you're using, but you're stepping into the conflict with the group. Once in a while, it'll be conflict with one person. I think I told a story earlier in our trainings about asking a person to leave because they were so disruptive and would not follow the agreements that all the group had made together with this person. That's a rare case. Sometimes it's one person taking up a lot of space and you can go to them in a break and talk to them. But when it's a whole group in conflict, how do you hold that space for people to work? One of the groups, the folks got so up in conflict that we had to literally cancel what we were planning to do. And I think, Matthew, you talked about this, and Biswadeb too, about how much time and resources that can take. And sometimes you think, oh, I don't have time to do this. But if it's big enough, if you don't do it, it's just going to emerge anyway. It'll start emerging and people won't move forward. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how to do it. But I wonder first, let's see, am I ready to share? Yeah, so think about what are some of the obstacles or fears that you might feel? Is there a slide before this, Tony? I can't see. That's
no.
What slide are we in? I'm on slide 19.
Yes, we're supposed to be on slide 18.
Okay, so yeah, let's just skip over to 19 for right now.
All right.
I'm sorry. But I want to check in with you about what is your fear as a facilitator, as a leader, if a group's in conflict, what are your fears about the obstacles of you stepping into that conflict with the group and managing it? What are your concerns about that? Or obstacles?
I think the first thing is not enough information. I don't have enough information.
Okay. What else?
I am very wary of power and I always worry that my sort of, if I have power in a situation, that and my privilege will make me a bad or inauthentic mediator, or someone who by rights shouldn't have power in that conflict.
Okay. What else? Other people have concerns about stepping into facilitating or leading around a group that's in conflict? Let's assume it's a circle.
Sometimes the danger is that in the end you will be blamed by all sides.
That
nobody's really happy with the result.
Yeah, I've certainly had that happen to me with staff before.
I wonder if I'll be respected, and if I will appear respectful.
How they will perceive my judgment or my contribution.
Say that again, Despina.
That sometimes when I'm stepping into such a conflict, I'm fearful of people's perception, like how people will perceive me or judge me when I've made some contribution to the contribution to ending the conflict.
Right. Good.
I think also lack of connections, like most of the time when I'm facing a conflict situations, and of course this no lack of information, but even having information, sometimes if I don't have enough trust on the connection with the community, it fears me. But whenever I have connection with people, I find it doesn't matter if I be blamed, but there would be people besides me standing me, supporting me. So like it's really connections that matter to me.
Any other concerns?
Yeah, what I was trying to tell was the fear of antagonizing the people in authority usually deter us from entering into a conflict situation.
Okay, can someone capture that in chat, what Abraham just said? Antagonizing the people in
the fear.
Oh, I got you. You got it. Never mind. Yeah. Anyway.
When conflicts appear in a working group, I fear that the division of the synchronicity of the group.
So you fear the division?
Yes.
So, sometimes you are afraid to lose friends or make enemies.
Afraid to lose friends or make enemies. Yes. Okay, so let's talk about what would help, but I'd just like to have a general thing. When I said there was a situation where I felt like I was blamed by two sides, it was between staff, and I had them all put their opinions forth to me and make a decision, but I allowed them to be confidential. And that was a problem, because had I not asked them to be confidential, they would have seen they were actually on opposite sides, but they sided up against me because they were both unhappy. So, but in most situations where I've stopped something and dealt with conflict, usually when it just rises up in the group. I mean, there have been times when I go in knowing there's conflict. That's usually when I carry the elephants. But there's times when it just pops up in the middle of something unexpectedly. I have never had anyone get angry and disrespect me. Maybe one person feels bad, but usually, you know, the division in a way, I think, that you talk about is there anyway. It's there anyway. And the only way to get people to come together is to actually head on deal with that conflict, even though it's really scary. I mean, I talk about doing it a lot. I'm scared every single time I do it for all the reasons you said. Am I going to make things worse? You know, how am I going to keep this group together? But if I go to the things I know in my heart, like getting people to share stories, getting them to share vision, getting them to speak the truth. I said we'd come back to people who said just straight talk. That's a tool that elephants help do. If I take time out to have people hold hands and sing a song or listen to music or do appreciations, I think someone mentioned that, it always makes things better. I've never had it make things worse. Now, Abraham raised something about antagonizing the people in authority. And that I've not had that experience. So I could imagine that would be really hard if there's someone who has a lot of power over other people. But I don't think we have to worry. I mean, I think it's good to always have a healthy respect for our own power in a room. And are we using it for good, or are we using it for something else? And I think when we're dealing with conflict, we may be standing in a leadership role, and the group really depends on us to do that. They really depend on us. And if that may be a level of privilege because we hold power in the group, it also gives us a level of responsibility. A level of responsibility that we have this power and privilege. We can't throw it away because we're in that room, we're the facilitator, we're the leader, whatever role we're playing, we have that responsibility to help folks. Does that make sense? So what are other things that would help? If you don't have enough information, what's something you could do to change that? So I'm talking about the obstacles over here, not enough information.
Mm-hmm. I have something that I think addresses multiple obstacles and fears. If you have established and formalized mechanisms or positions that spring into play for a conflict. So, for example, in the chat earlier, I mentioned, you know, union representatives, they came about because of the sort of uncontained nature of conflict between employees and bosses. And the fact that bosses could just like fire people who just, you know, challenged or wanted more pay. And so your union representative is responsible for finding out the facts. They give them the case, and they're given immunity from persecution by bosses to investigate, to establish the facts, and to advocate. And it doesn't force the boss then to take sides either, because you've got an established person who's on someone's side. So there's no sort of pressure put on anyone to take sides, because there's a formal process for someone on your side, so you don't feel like alone either as well. So that's just one example. But, you know, for example, yours that you mentioned too, of just confidential feedback, you know, creating a level of safety for people. I think that sort of flattens power out, which is really important in conflict. Anything which manages and mitigates power in a conflict is especially important. And I think those do need to be formal mechanisms, not just practices.
Right. So another way that's a formality that's not as formal, but in our small groups, if we've created agreements together of how we're going to act and what we're going to do, we can always go back to those agreements and say, do we need to make new agreements to have this discussion? And if someone's yelling or something and we have an agreement to be respectful and listen, we can point to that. So that's one way of having something that's established. I want to go back to this not enough information. What would you do if you wanted to get all the information out? Since that's a fear.
Maybe you need to listen as much as you can.
Yeah.
Give time to listen to everybody.
Yes, that's the key. So listening to everybody. So having people do a go-round, either with elephants or telling a story or whatever it is, a question you can ask people so you can hear from everybody's point of view. And if someone doesn't have a point of view, they just pass. So that's a really good way. If you don't have all the information and you don't know what the conflict's about, it's even if you think you have all the information, often you don't, because it's like the elephant. And you may see the elephant as a whole, somebody sees it as a fan, somebody sees it as a tree, somebody sees it as a rope. So just having that go round in a group will help everybody see all of it.
Linda?
Uh-huh.
Do you want to say anything about when you would suggest getting information by a go-round and getting information by phone calls in advance, like in the story you told earlier? How do you decide which to do?
Well, if I'm trying to put a group of people together that I know might have a hard time coming together, like building national networks, it's usually, for example, the education group. All of them cared about better education. Some of them thought this should be in the public schools. Others thought there needed to be alternative schools. So in that case, I know I'm bringing two groups of people that have very different strategies. They may have the same vision, but they have different strategies on how they work on it. And so then I'm going to try to do the pre-work. And I usually, if I'm building any kind of network, I'm usually trying to call people ahead of time and find out what their biggest concern of coming into a network is, what their biggest fear is, and what would help that. And that's an organizing piece of work. That's an organizer's job, is to try to, not just to bring people together and knowing that they all work from different strategies or knowing they all have different religious beliefs, but how do you prep ahead of time and build that respect? So we've talked a lot about general strategies. I think this is really good. If we go to the next slide, you've listed a lot of strategies, but is there any we want to add? I know we talked about breathing. Sometimes funny songs. There's actually a really funny song one of my coworkers used about elephants, to kind of break up funny songs or games. I like to put on dance music and get everyone in the room dancing. In fact, I'm going to ask all of y'all to send me a piece of dance music from your culture that we can have when we do our training. The one-on-one conversations, sometimes I break people into small groups. Icebreakers, opening up with an icebreaker question that gets everybody in a heart place and gets them out of their head, always helps. So that's just the beginning, and I'm sure we'll keep looking at tools and you can keep exploring. But it's an amazing thing. What are a few other strategies that we haven't mentioned that people would add?
I think there is something to be said for, and I think this fits in with URI's principle of learning and adaptation as well, identifying what we can learn from conflicts that have happened, and also a risk assessment of what may cause conflict, and establish some strategies for conflict prevention. I think that's a big part of it too.
Yes. Yes. Great. And, you know, every time we do this, and looking to your peers, you know, if you're near Soderot, who's done a lot of work on conflict resolution, getting him to help, or getting just another person to help you is always useful, or to think through, you know, with Maria or Alice or Matt, help think through what kind of support you need if you're taking this on. But more often than not, sometimes we know we're taking it on. More often than not, we're in the middle of a group and something comes up, and what do? I'd say first you take a pause, and even if you ask for a break and you allow yourself to connect to your heart and follow your intuition. I was reading a piece of this book, This Moral Imagination, and he talked about the fact that the real experts in conflict resolution, who, like leaders like Gandhi and folks like that, that they use more of their intuition than they do the rules of how to do conflict resolution and the training we receive. And I find that helps me more than anything. It's just, to me, it's checking in with spirit, checking in with, you know, what I know in my heart. And that helps me move forward. It gives me the courage to do it as well. It takes a lot of courage. So, anything else? Any other ideas?
Sometimes we can wait for a heaven-sent moment.
Say that again.
A heaven-sent moment. There may be some miracle happening in several locations, you know. So you just give time so that the heavens will intervene.
Mm-hmm. So giving it time till...
And wait for a heaven-sent moment.
A heaven-sent moment. That's beautiful. Mm-hmm. I like this, what Deb said, promote local issues, culture. So we've gotten lots of great ideas. This group is so full of amazing strategies of how we can do this. And I think what we'll do is take the strategies from the previous training and the strategies we talked about earlier and now, and put them all together and send them out to folks. Just as reminders. I've learned some things, and Biswa Deb, you're gonna send me the fishbone thing. Or was that Mamoon? Who did the fishbone?
Yes, that's in the chat, Linda.
Okay, good. Great. Oh, I see it. And Mamoon, sorry about that. And I look forward to learning new things from this conversation. So I appreciate it a lot. So to end, what I'd like everybody to think about is possibly a personal commitment that you're going to make to yourself about conflict, and one commitment you want to make to this group or your circle or circles or anything. And you could type that in chat. Just a commitment that you want to make from having this conversation with all these brilliant minds here. And it was so good to do the opening exercise, the circle exercise, and hear so many strategies coming out of this group that you already know about conflict. So, yes. People write in chat what they want to do as a next step. And maybe you don't know any groups with any conflict, and that would be amazing. Thank you, Abraham. Is there any new strategies you heard? Yes, thank you. Thank you. Any new strategies you heard in the workshop from myself or other people? Right. Anyway, question?
The commitment with myself is to continue breathing, practicing to go to my inner, not to judge, and find the answer from my being, from my thoughts.
Yes, yes.
And with the group, I'm going to read again all this contribution and try to connect and to take the best from my experience.
Great. Great. Thank you. Yeah. And, it's not only listening for yourself, but helping your group listen to each other is one I would add. Are you bringing a musical instrument with you, Biswadeb, when you come in June?
Yes.
Good.
Oh, you're in for a treat, Linda.
I know I am. I'm excited. Oh, yes. Yes, yes.
Wherever I am, I have next to me.
Oh, good.
It's his Shasta.
Yes. Yes. Shasta doesn't make the music, though.
No, but this is Bishwadev's version.
Yes, exactly. It's a better version. Well, not better, but better for conflict anyway. So, great. All right. So I'm going to ask that y'all do an evaluation. And I will just say my evaluation is this group is filled with brilliance and light and amazing. So I appreciate that. And I can't wait to see all of you in June. So is there we have like 4 minutes. We can just go around and say a closing appreciation for people in the group or whatever you'd like to say. Who would like to start? Karima, do you want to start us?
Here's my elephant. I think elephants will never be the same for me. And I remember a lot and enjoyed the conversation and the exchange. Huh? I think it's ongoing work. It's ongoing work to practice and deepen. And
yes. Yeah, thank you. And please show your elephant if you haven't yet. In a way, you're on mute.
Yes. Okay, I have to appreciation. I want to appreciate that I'm very happy, and when I have the training session and the coaching session, I say, oh, okay, I'm going there, because it will be very helpful for me in my daily life and in my daily work, or your teachings. And thank you, because it's a grace to have this opportunity. And with my partners here, I love them a lot. See them and feel the energy, it made me happy, my soul. And I feel like accompanied, like I am not alone in this road.
Ruby? Or Abraham?
Yeah, it was a real wonderful opportunity to attend this training, because we are with almost an enlightened group of people always, So they are all maybe good peace builders and practitioners in their own respective locale. And always we can learn a lot, because learning is a lifelong process. So it has no limitations. It transcends all boundaries. So I always found this as a good enlightening exercise.
So who else? We need to go quickly so we get off it. On. Yes, this way there.
Thank you. Bringing elephant to this part of the training, it really symbolizes good health. So I wish that each of us stay connected and practice, however, morning, evening yoga to keep yourself well. And especially this training program, by the end sessions of it, having elephant is always good luck. Yeah. So it's all in our culture, that whomever ends with a good luck is really always stay the good luck with you. So really we are a good chain of people, and this elephant symbolizes good luck, good wisdom. I don't know, it's a natural phenomenon. Linda, you bought it somehow. It just worked so divinely well. And having elephant with us, this energy will continue and we all be healthy. And I'm so energized by what we have been learning.
Okay, great.
And we have Emmanuel's comment in the chat, Linda.
One view or truth is, oh wait, I'm not at the bottom. I'm thankful to technology for letting me be here today, and for everyone for the time of sharing and learning together. Subi says, I'm thankful to everyone for sharing not just opportunities, but also challenges, helping each other to learn and grow. That's so important. So yes, thank you so much. One last comment, anyone? We're good? Okay. I will see you next month at the coaching session, and we'll talk about what you've tried and what's worked, what are more challenges. Please bring your challenges and successes. So I love you all, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Bye, all.
Bye.
Thank you, Linda, and everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye. Bye, Emmanuel. Bye, Abraham.